So, Jim, you've spoken to me before about how Jerry Lawler was one of your heroes growing up when you watched professional wrestling. And one of the things I think that he did the best in the WWF, apart from commentating with you, was he would do storylines with people where there was an element of realism to it, whether it was Bret Hart and making fun of his family, or Jake Roberts and going towards the alcoholism thing. But in December of 1996, on Raw, Jerry Lawler stood across the ring from Goldust and insinuated that Goldust was...
I think it was more than insinuation.
So
I think he pretty flat out stated it.
It's interesting looking back on it now because the world's a different place. But for WWF to kind of go that far, what was the mindset? Because Jerry Lawler was very believable in his role. But what was the mindset of doing that?
I can answer that question. Shock value. It's what the Attitude Era was based on. Shock value. Mae Young giving birth to a hand. Hot lesbian action. So that's it. It's
but you know
value.
what? But they couldn't show it on free cable TV, so it's like tickling your taint with no blowjob after. There's no payoff. But no, here with Lawler, here's the thing. And none of you ever go to YouTube and look at anything that Jerry Lawler did in the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum in the 1970s. I'm not his press agent. I'm not going to list all his credentials. But many of my books, available at jimcornette.com. He was the top star in a city that ran a 10,000-seat plus arena 52 weeks a year. In 1974, his first year as a main event star, they sold 400,000 wrestling tickets to 50 shows at the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum. They did that because Jerry Lawler, at the age of 23, was an incredible worker and was the best promo in the business. And you had to make it real. That's what I grew up on. You had to make, when JR grew up in Oklahoma, you had to make territory wrestling as real as possible. If anybody thought it wasn't on the level, they wouldn't go. So Lawler was incredibly believable, not only with the incredible bumps he took, not only with the incredible punches he threw and the movie fight scenes that he had in the main events, but also he could tell you anything and make it believable. And that's why every time that something was, an angle was pitched to him like that, it had an extra element of realism to it because he knew from all those years of experience how to somehow make the preposterous posterous, right? And that's what guys are missing today because they weren't brought up in an era where it had to look real and had to be believable and had to seem logical, and then you could get the people in. Now that everybody knows that the jig is up and the horse has left the barn and all the guys are worried about is, how can I get my in? And how can I do this move or that spot or whatever? Because nobody's going to believe this anyway, so let's just entertain the folks. I entertained motherfuckers when I was a manager by making people take a swing at me in front of cops and go to jail for it. And a bunch of them did. Many of them connected. And that was a good thing because then they kept coming back week after week. So that's why with Lawler, everything had more of an edge. All of the veterans.
And that was Lawler's remark, too. They might have vetted to Vince the queer line. But either Jerry suggested it or he ad-libbed it. That's my take on that deal. It was his fingerprints all over it. But we had a lot of talents in that era that you could trust to put their fingerprints on their creative. Anybody that shows up, man, and just you take your instructions from the booker or the writer or whatever, and without adding things, I think you're not earning your money. You're not doing what you need to do. So I think that's an issue. But we had talents. You look at that Attitude Era roster. The talkers. I don't know. We had anybody that had to memorize a promo from start to finish. They would get bullet points.
I never did. I couldn't have.
I did. I tell you this. I did a thing with Michael Cole. That's long after the Attitude Era, where I did a rap. They wanted me to do a rap because it's kind of a rib on me. I got it. I'm not that naive. You get an older guy. A 50-plus-year-old guy at that time trying to be a rapper. Come on, it's a joke. And nobody wanted to pay to see me have a match. They didn't want to pay to see me do a heel promo. They wanted to hear me do play-by-play. That was my deal. And that's all I wanted to do. So egocentrically, people said, why didn't you like those bits? You know, Lawler and I had tag matches. You know, God bless William Regal and Lance Storm. They had to put up with our stuff. And that was an interesting night in the Attitude Era in the late 90s. Lawler had been on a weight loss kick, probably going through another girlfriend transition. Taking a lot of fat burners, which turned his fecal matter liquid. And that's all real good until you want to break wind. You know, that's a scary thing, man, when you're in a public environment and you need to pass a little gas, but you're not sure if it's going to be, a little bit of gas or it's going to be liquid. And so when we had a big match, tag match, Lawler and I against the un-Americans, the evil Brit and the evil Canadian, God, oh yeah. They could be from Serbia or, or Iran or something that was really having an issue with the free world. It was a Canadian and a Brit. Oh, they're dangerous. Hey, watch those guys. And of course, I didn't know how to work, still don't, and don't want to learn, and I will not learn. But Lawler was in that match, took a backdrop, and he looked at me in the face like something's wrong. So for a second there, I thought he might have hurt himself, which would really scare me because that means I have to do more because the only guy on our team that could work is now injured. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it was not that way. He had that little gassy moment, and he had his Jerry Lawler Monday Night Memphis white babyface outfit on. And what started out as and Regal and Storm weren't aware, but they could smell this odor. Something somewhere is really bad. And so I'm seeing what's going on, and I look at Lawler's tights, and it starts out about the size of a milk dud. You guys got milk duds over here? Milk duds, right? Or a little cluster of M&Ms. About the size of a quarter. By the time we went home, it looked like a Snickers bar. He hates when I tell this story, but it's a true story.
I wonder why.
Yeah, go back and watch it. It was on television. It happened, and of course the truck and Vince back in the gorilla position, and everybody. It's too good a rib not to show on TV. You don't zoom in on it, but you kind of know it's there. So it was that whole era was a different. We did different stuff.
Do you guys want to know how in the old days, before they had all these comedy writers have degrees from major universities, and if they were caught in the men's locker room, they'd be whistling "Stranger in Paradise"? Before they took over, you want to know how guys put matches together? Okay. Me and JR are in the main event Monday night in the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum. The booker comes in and says, okay, JR's the heel. I want him to you, JC, because you're coming back in a cage match the next week. That's all we'd get. And then we would go out and we'd have an argument on TV or cut promos on each other, whatever, based on what we were doing and what we had done. And then we would sit down about 10 minutes probably before we went in the ring. In Lawler's case, a lot of times because he's playing cards. Lawler's the most unflappable guy. If he's playing cards and you came in and said, King, the arena's on fire. Well, guess this will have to be the last hand. So we would sit down and we would say something like, I'd say, JR, why don't you, when I make my comeback, bail out of the ring and go down the aisle and I'll grab you and throw you back in. And I'll kick your ass some more. And you bail out, you go down the aisle, I'll grab you, I'll throw you back in. And as I come back in, you pull the knucks out of your tights and knock me out, boom, pin me, 1, 2, 3. Next week, we're coming back in a cage. You ain't going to be able to run from me this time, you no good son of a gun. That's it. And then you'd go out and you'd do it. The booker was the guy who manipulated the personalities into the matches and gave you who was going to win and who was going to lose and what you were coming back with. And a lot of times you had input in that. Now these writers think that, oh, this is a Broadway play or it's a goddamn major motion picture. And we have to write every word, and we have to write every hand gesture, and then the producers have to say, well, you're going to do this move and that move and this move and the other move, and it's so homogenized and pasteurized and sanitized, it looks like one of those wrappers around the toilet seat at a cheap motel. All the passion and emotion has been pulled and ripped out from under it, just like I have pulled and ripped all of Kenny's questions out from under him.
I do just want to summarize this slide. The king called Goldust a and then Jerry Lawler himself. That's the summary of this slide. But I want to talk next, JR, about Shotgun Saturday Night in January of 1997. The night before the Royal Rumble, Terry Funk gets in the ring and my particular favorite line was calling Todd Pettingill's mother a
Son of a bitch, can you speak any clearer, you egg-sucking dog?
Your mother's a
Your mother's a
and your mother's a
mother's a and my brother Dory is not a you son of a
My brother Dory took that dog out behind the barn, and I never saw that dog again.
You think Dory killed my dog?
Hey, wait a minute, I'll give you real. We're on Memphis TV one time, and Lawler knew that Terry Funk was my idol, and I'd just been managing about 6 months, right? And Memphis TV is live in front of 300,000 people on Channel 5 every Saturday morning, went 100 miles in every direction, right? I'm managing Jesse Barr. He puts Jesse Barr and two masked guys, the Masked Marauders, Robert Reed and Ken Raper, if people are paying attention. He puts them against Jerry Lawler, Coco Ware, and Terry Funk, who have a six-man tag match, first time ever teaming up against Jimmy Hart's guys the following Monday in Memphis. And they wanted to with me and rib me, right? Of course, I didn't know this, and Jesse Barr thinks, well, they're jobbing me out. I'm going to quit now, right? It was only to get me in the match. Funk chases me down and rips my pants off on live television without asking whether I was freeballing or not. Fortunately, the boys were covered. But you talk about the look, that was legitimate. Those people thought Cornette is scared because you know what? I was scared because Terry Funk was bearing down on me. I'd been in the business 6 months and I knew him, but I wasn't sure because he could make you believe that, right? He grabbed my pockets and boom, and the pants came down. Now I've got to come back out later on in the show to do an interview. And I've only got one pair of pants. So I have to take duct tape and tape my pants back around me. And then I come out at the end with Adrian Street. As a matter of fact, by the way, the exotic Adrian and Miss Linda. It's where I learned all your cute colloquial phrases of speech over here from Adrian. And so the first thing I go is I scream, Funk! But since it was so high-pitched, they thought that I just said on live TV. And I almost got kicked off TV. What were you saying?
Shotgun Saturday Night.
Shotgun. I just wondered. So Terry Funk comes out and he does that promo, calls Todd Pettingill's mother a. What is Vince McMahon's reaction to Terry Funk and this promo?
Was that they wanted like that on Shotgun Saturday Night, right? I don't think they knew exactly what he was going to say, but they wanted him to go ballistic, right?
It was intended to be edgy, it was based on the day part that the show aired. So in other words, if you had a show on Saturday morning that was more kid-friendly, you had to be a responsible programmer and be aware of that. But on the Saturday night show, they looked at recreating what the Saturday Night's Main Event was, only in syndication, meaning on all these local stations, not one big network, and then being a little edgier. And certainly Terry was very proficient at being edgy.
They wanted it to be like a Memphis TV type of thing, live TV, anything can happen, etc. But the WWF did not know, first of all, how to produce a low-budget TV show. They just didn't. Everything still had to look good. Secondly, Vince is, for lack of a better term, he loves humor that involves flatulence and and pissing and weirdness and the flying nuns that are coming in. He had on one of the first Shotgun Saturday nights, I'm supposed to be at the bus station in New York because of Minnie Vader, the little Mexican Minnie, right? I've brought him in because I manage Vader. Now I manage the Minnie Vader, but I'm so cheap, I bought him a bus ticket from Mexico City to New York. That's part of the gag. And then we're supposed to go in the goddamn, and we're not doing this with a permit. We just got a camera and we're at the bus station in New York with a Mexican midget dressed like Vader and me and Gimmick. We didn't even stand out in New York. And the gag is Vince wants us to go in, and the midget just got off the bus from Mexico, so he's got to piss. And so I'm supposed to be trying to lift him up because he's too short for the urinal. And that's the gag, is I can't lift the fat Mexican midget, but then we walk in there in the urinal, he can reach the urinal. So there was no gag, and he didn't even have to really piss. So it didn't work. But Vince wanted it to be edgy.
And speaking of edgy, then, because I think, how many of you watched the WWF in 1997? So a lot of you might remember the Final Four pay-per-view, where all of a sudden Marlena was grabbed by this beast of a woman out of nowhere. Chyna debuts in the WWF.
Why, there she is right there.
There she is.
Who's that guy in the yellow shirt? Did he work here?
Look at the woman to Marlena's left. She genuinely thinks she's about to get hit. But so Chyna comes in, and she was a big departure from what you saw in the WWF for women. Was Vince reluctant to bring in someone like Chyna at first, or was he just all for it from the start?
Vince, one of the traits of a really good booker is if you have top talent in your territory, and even though WWE has a global footprint, so it's not really a territory. Because it doesn't perform in only one specific region. He always had a good ability, to Vince, to connect and communicate with his top talent. And that's a mark of his dad and Gorilla Monsoon and all those old school bookers. They all knew where their bread was buttered. You know, when Bruno Sammartino was the champion for 9 years, I love this deal. Well, John Cena's going to try to be tied Ric Flair's 16-time. If I was a 16-time champion, I'm not so damn sure I'm going to be bragging about that. Because somebody beat your ass 16 times. I'm not saying it's not a great feat, and I'm sure as hell for some of you that are going to tweet this out or talk to somebody online that JR's knocking Flair. I'm not. I'm just saying that in theory, I would say that Bruno's 9 years on top, think about that. 9 years on top is a bigger accomplishment than winning and losing a title 16 times. That's all. It's a philosophy. So, I don't know. What was we going at?
Chyna.
Was
it a departure for Vince to bring Chyna?
I haven't slept in 2 days. Here's the deal. You guys heard me on my podcast. I have sleep apnea. And I don't know how many of you guys may have sleep apnea here. I'm going to segue back into Chyna, don't get me wrong. But I stopped breathing 99 times in an hour. And if I hadn't had it diagnosed, and I didn't know I had it until I moved from Connecticut back to Oklahoma, I would have been dead by now, without no doubt. So it just puts so much strain on your heart. You're going to get it, you know what I mean? So it's a tough deal. Chyna, I didn't sleep, so that's why I'm kind of spacey here. I actually ought to have more to drink, and I'd probably be better. So anyway, Chyna was recommended by Shawn Michaels and Triple H. They met her. They were intrigued by her. And a good booker will always list the talents that are either hot, timely, doing well, because the instincts. They got a good feel for what's going on. And so, and granted, you're right. She was different. No, there have never been a woman in the wrestling business like her, ever. Goes back to what we said earlier tonight. Uniqueness, reinvent, be different, and by God, she was different. And so the rear naked choke on Terry Runnels and then shaking her like a rag doll was a hell of a visual. And Terry's hair's flying all around, going crazy. And, you know, we sold it like, who is this monster, this Amazon, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So it worked out really well. So Chyna really came along at a good time, good place. I never agreed with her wrestling men. If I had to say, and I can tell you that until I was forced, not forced, suggested strongly that she continue to wrestle men on the road, and it made sense. If you're going to expose it on television, you're kind of cheating you guys if you come to your town and you don't see what you're seeing on television in some presentation. But if I had my say, she would never wrestle a man. I don't think it's believable. And every time a talent does anything to take us out of our moment and steal the reality from us to make us break our trance of falling into that love of the business again, and we're saying, oh, geez, that was horrible. You can't go there. You just can't do that. So I think that, the Chyna thing was really, really good. And I went through the whole deal with her, all the way from her through the Attitude Era and her leaving, and me trying to negotiate with her to stay. And she found out, about her significant other was having an affair or whatever. But point is that it was not believable. I can't tell you how many guys I see in the airport because I'm very approachable. I'm always going to be approachable. But guys say, JR, look, you really entertain me. You're the voice of my childhood. Blah blah blah. Said that, man, when that woman, that big broad was wrestling all the guys. Geez, that was horrible. What do you say? I can't tell you that you're wrong because if you feel it was horrible, then hell, it's horrible in your eyes, right? It's like Corny and I were talking earlier to coming up here. I said, he said, well, you might not agree with this, JR. And I said, but I'm not going to argue about it. It's your opinion. How can somebody's opinion be that wrong if it's only an opinion? And that's what you find on Twitter and social media. I sent out a tweet yesterday about Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. And you thought that I had, had just done some sacrilegious, my God, pedophile. If you don't want to watch it, guess what? Go take a walk. Go read a book. Go take a shit. I don't care what you do. It won't last that long.
Go take a shit, ladies and gentlemen.
Let me say one thing, because I think there are actually 2 or 3 females in this sausage fest. So, for you, I don't want you to think that
ladies.
JR was being, sexist when he said it wasn't believable for Chyna to wrestle men. And I know Ronda Rousey can kick the shit out of the guy working the cash register at Boots. I'm aware of that, right? But allegedly, on a wrestling program, all these guys are trained professional athletes, and it's physiognomical, anatomical, physiological, whatever the word, human nature, whatever, that a woman cannot whip another man of equal or greater size when they're both supposed to be trained professional fighters. And, she got in her head somehow that she was going to do this. She was going to be the female Steve Austin and make all this money or whatever. And that, it was great. She was believable taking a blunt instrument and whacking some guy over the head from behind. Now, I believe that. But as far as wrestling a man straight up, especially a man her size or larger, which most of them were, no, that's what killed her off. And she wasn't smart enough to realize it. Because then, all of a sudden, she went from somebody you could buy being real to, okay, now they're letting her win. And that's death. I'm sorry.
What really killed her was when she gave me the pedigree on 6-inch heels in the Georgia Dome and drove my back of my head into her crotch and the front of my face into the mat. That was unbelievable.
Chyna, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to kind of...
Wait. Here's the other thing about Chyna. It applies to a lot of people, no matter their gender. It's the Andre syndrome. It's what Corny said about, repetitiveness, making things unique. What I use in illustration, if you're going to use a chair, I'm going to ask my main event if they need a chair before I bless you using it in the third match. She was just a really, really intense, unique person, but it just didn't make any common sense. And when you start doing things that defy any form of logic in a pro wrestling situation, as a fan, and you guys know what I'm talking about, you can watch any show you want. There's something on that show sometimes that just completely disconnects you, and you get frustrated, you get angry. And then it feeds into what we all have become in a social media world, whether it's politics, this podcast. We all become, to some degree, because of the information flow, and we can get it published, so to speak, contrarians. People on wrestling feedback had rather say that was that was bad, that was nothing, it was horrible, I should never booked it, it didn't make any sense, I could book it better, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying, well, you know, I like the effort, and I like the second match, and I like this match. We always go to the lowest common denominator now in feedback. Look at the feedback now on wrestling online. It's much more prevalent to say something sucked than say, well, that wasn't bad. But if it's pretty good, then it's always, you know, it's pretty good. It's always like, well, yeah, but it wasn't as good as, Austin and Bret Hart. Well, in WrestleMania 13, well, few things were better than Austin and Bret Hart. But if you want to
that's my favorite WWF match of all time. Steve Austin and Bret Hart. And that I Quit match. No. This is the highest compliment I can give. It should have been on Starrcade. It wasn't a WWF match, it was a wrestling match. It was real. You could feel it.
That just pisses me off.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen of Castle Cornette over there, by the way.